I'm Dr. Jillian Lucas Baker. I'm a professor, a wife, and a mom, and I've struggled with fertility issues.
I'm Sonora Joy Allwood, a holistic nurse, health coach, entrepreneur, wife, and mom. And I've also struggled with fertility issues.
I'm Raelle Hamilton Romeo. I'm a PR executive, a storyteller, and an adjunct professor. I'm a mom and a travel enthusiast, and I've struggled with fertility issues.
Welcome to A Tribe Called Fertility.
Welcome, Tribe. Today, we're finishing up our 3-part series on pregnancy and maternal loss. In part 1, we heard from a mother who suffered a miscarriage. In part 2, we heard from a father who lost his partner following the birth of their second child. And today, we'll hear from a grandmother on how she's keeping her daughter's memory alive for her grandchildren.
With that, I'd like to introduce our guest, Shawnee Benton-Gibson. Shawnee is a healer, speaker, author, and coach. She is also a licensed social worker, co-founder and CEO of Spirit of a Woman, and an activist. Shawnee lost her daughter, Shamony Gibson, on October 6, 2019, at age 30. Shamony passed away due to a pulmonary embolism 2 weeks after giving birth to her second child. Also joining us today is our resident psychologist, Dr. Angela Clack. Dr. Clack and Shawnee have actually known each other for some time, and Shawnee wrote the foreword for Dr. Clack's book, Woman of Color Talk, Psychological Narratives on Trauma and Depression. Welcome, Shawnee, and welcome back, Dr. Clack.
Greetings, ladies.
Greetings, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Definitely want to have this conversation and love that it's 5 Black women talking about this. So thank you for taking this on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And we are super, super excited to have you here with us today. We have so much that we want to ask you about and talk about. But before we do, can you and Dr. Clack tell us how you know each other?
Whoa, oh my goodness. I'm going to start because it has been such a pleasure for me to have this sister in my life. We met through my book coach, so Robin Devonish. Robin was helping me to get through my book, and we were looking for someone to write the foreword. She immediately thought of Shawnee, and she was just so impressed with just the way that you describe things, the way you articulate, the way you use language, and then just your brilliance around women of color. And so she goes, listen, she's not all this person you're looking for. If you're looking for them like a superstar, something like people want these forward Oprahs. She said, but I guarantee you, you will be more than impressed with her. We knew nothing about each other at all. So we got together and had a conversation, and it connected immediately. I love Shawnee so much. I only get to see her virtually. We were supposed to meet together. What event would we saw each other this past summer, right before COVID?
Oh my gosh, I have no clue.
It was something that I had to cancel. It was someone's event, and I couldn't go travel.
Yes, yeah, we were going to be in Brooklyn together.
Yes,
I think everybody canceled except for me, so I was the only speaker.
Yeah, she was there. Yeah, because they held it. They went ahead and held it, and I was
that's dedication
to our first time being together. And so the foreword of my book is beautiful and awesome. It sets off the whole book. So that's how we met. We met through my book editor. They're both New Yorkers, and I'm in New Jersey, but I've been in New York so many times doing different events. I feel like I'm a part of the New York family.
We receive you.
Yeah, it's the tri-state. You know what I mean? Like,
It's all the same, really.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because oftentimes we don't hear stories where sisters meet and we can just trust each other off the bat. You know what I mean? So that's just beautiful. I really thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
What I will add, and it's just in alignment with what you just shared, Sonora, is that for me, it's not the length of the connection, it's the strength of the connection. And immediately I fell in love with Angela. It's like we have to keep building with one another. And I felt so honored to open up her book, and then to open up about my journey as a woman of color, and then all of the women of color that have poured into me, clients that I've had, folks that I've served over the course of my 30-year career as a social worker. And without them, I wouldn't be the person that is here before you. So I'm just grateful that I got a chance to be contribution in that way. I may never know the women that read the book at all, but I know that because I brought my authentic and full self to it, that it'll make a difference. That's how I live my life.
That's like a tweet. It's not the length, it's the tweet.
Right? That's dope. I like
Better
that.
hurry up and like
Love
copyright
it.
that because I'm probably gonna put that in my next paper or
That's a
something.
Love it.
tweetable moment.
Love
That
Yep.
was awesome.
So, Shawnee, this past summer, I heard a speech you gave on Black maternal mortality at the Women's March on Washington. What was that experience like, and how have things changed for you since?
Oh my goodness. So first and foremost, well, my family's involved with a documentary about maternal health, which will be introduced maybe towards the end of 2021. But the producer director for the documentary had a relationship with Al Sharpton and his team. And, it was the March on Washington. It was the 57th anniversary. And she felt like this issue should have been on the platform. And so she was like, let me ask. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but let me just ask. And the old adage, you have not because you ask not. And so she put it out there and
Yes.
we said yes. And so even though the focus was on police brutality and violence against Black and brown folk, I know that the system, as far as reproductive health, has perpetuated violence against Black and brown bodies, women, and babies for eons. And so it was totally apropos for me to be on the stage. But it was so surreal to be standing there where Martin Luther King stood 57 years before, and to be looking out on the mall and seeing all of these people, and to have my voice be the voice that was speaking about this issue. It was just so major. And I was channeling my daughter. Nobody can tell me otherwise. Like before I got up, my daughter was very assertive, like very vocal, just like her mama. And she's like, move out the way, Ma. They think it's you, but it's me. And so, it was just such an honor to be standing before our people, my people, and sharing it in that way. And the words that came up and out, when I go back and reflect and look, I'm like, who was that? Who said that? It was me. Not because it's me, but because of the resonance. I know that spirit was moving that day. And I'm so grateful that I was privileged to be able to hold space in that way as well.
Wow.
Love it.
I felt every part of that. I can just say for me, watching, as an onlooker, something shifted for me. I felt that after your speech, after being on the world stage in that manner, I felt that everyone began to start talking about Black maternal mortality. And when you gave that speech, I was like, oh my God, the whole atmosphere shifted. I thank the creator for, using you as a vessel to be able to highlight this sad topic.
So I did want to ask, you do a lot. You're a CEO of So Leadership, and you've been this amazing, that's an understatement, just powerhouse supporter for maternal health outcomes for the majority of your career. So I wanted to ask you, are you still an active social worker? Do you still have a practice? Or so can people reach out to you to be your client? Anyone who'd be so lucky to have you? Are you still doing that as part of your career with everything else that you do?
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share about this. So, in grown folk talk, I'm grateful, ever grateful for the knowledge that I have, for the education that I've received. I always talk about, and this is just me being me, the expensive ass degree that I got, and that I'm still paying for. When I was a child, I didn't have the language healer, right? It's doctor, lawyer, teacher, police officer. I'm 52, so I was born in 68, so that language wasn't there. But I always knew as a child that this was the work that I was called to. Then I discovered it's like, girl, you don't like hospitals and you can't stand blood and you'll probably pass out. So maybe doctor is not the way to go.
Right.
When I was looking at the ways in which I could actually make a difference for people, social work just resonated with me. And I pursued that. And my intention was to become a clinician and to have a private practice. But Spirit was like, that's not what I took you through this process for. And so where I actually got really connected to the fact that I'm an actual healer was in the Black church. I was part of a ministry that did work around the impact of the antebellum period, the transatlantic slave trade. Church of St. Paul Community Baptist Church. I'm no longer an active member, but it transformed my life. And I was in school at the same time. And I'm like, I want to do work that makes a difference for Black and brown folks. I work with all kinds of people, but that's a very specific focus that I have, and that I just want to make a difference. And in the theoretical framework that, in social work, there's theories. A lot of the theories don't come from people that look like me. I just chose. I'm like, I want to have an eclectic approach to the work. I want to make sure that I unapologetically inject the conversation about race and culture. And when, I work it's my business called Spirit of a Woman. So dealing with issues around gender. And so my eclectic approach doesn't necessarily align with the systems that require insurance and diagnosis and all of. So my license is alive and I can work in spaces and do that work. I just choose to approach the work in a way that aligns with who I am for the world. And who I am for the world is unapologetically Black, woman, activist, revolutionary.
Yes, sister.
Yeah.
And so I work with people, but they need to embrace that that's the frame that I come from. So I do rites of passage with women, I do coaching, but once again, the overlay of spirit and race and culture is in the work. So if you're not looking to do that work, then I'm not the right pillar for you. However, I will always direct people to someone that will work for them and what they're looking for. So thank you for asking.
I like your reframe around how you became to embody the word healer. Because for me, as a clinician coming out of very, very mainstream dominant white institutions, that is not a word we would have ever embraced.
No.
And so as you come to do this work and now we're all moving toward decolonizing mental health, I can actually embody that word now. I feel like I'm evolving into being able to embrace and say healer. So I like how you reframe that. And the other thing I admire so much about your work is it's so much about spirit and body. And I've witnessed some of your rituals because during the COVID pandemic, the year-long, almost daily, right?
Yeah.
The daily
More. The first 100 days, it was every single day.
Yeah.
But now,
just the rituals and practices that you demonstrate, they're so powerful. And I think that people don't grasp the transformation that comes through those. Those are just powerful. And they're nothing that comes from a book. They're not about theory and they're not about books. That's what you bring to that. That's the embodiment I feel like you bring to the practice of healing, restorative practices, helping us to connect back to who we are, where we came from, all of that stuff. I got introduced to a lot of that through you and watching that. That's not something that I was ever trained on. I thank you for that. That connection was part of our connection. Like that's another thing you learn when you connect with folks about how they do work and how you get to witness work.
Absolutely. And I see the field shifting because they have
Yeah.
like what
Now.
folks what they are demand and a command for is just different. In order for you to be a viable clinician in the field, you have to be looking at people holistically, and part of that is practice who they are culturally and the skin that they're in, literally and figuratively. I'm glad you're open because I have colleagues that are not. They're like, what is this? And what are you talking about?
Wow.
Great talk, everybody. There's rooms I would never be in if I didn't have the license that I have. So, contracts that I get that it wouldn't even be on the table. I wouldn't be considered as a viable candidate for them if I didn't have that degree. So Spirit knew exactly what it was doing when it created the space for me to go to the school. So I'm grateful, but once I get in the door, they're like not ready always for who
Who's walking through the door.
they're like, what arrives when I get there? They're like, wait a minute,
Absolutely.
intuition. We're talking about race. Why are we talking about intuition? Leadership. Why are we talking about spirit and leadership? I'm like, this is what I do. If you don't want me, somebody else will want this.
Yeah, like to me, it embodies, like you said, holistic care, but also cultural competent care.
Yes.
Like that's taking it a step forward. You know what I mean? Instead of, just dealing with what we have now, which is not work. It's a broken system. So to me, I love what you do. And I love your approach. Is so refreshing. It's so refreshing.
And I think from a diaspora standpoint as well, there's a collective consciousness into how we healed each other. I think people of color intrinsically and just historically have come from societies where it's not one dimensional. We're treating the four bodies. We're treating the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. So to your point, Shawnee, it's like when it's not packaged the way people are expecting, it tends to be this like, whoa. But when you're around your tribe, your people, without even having to say enough, sometimes it's just absorbed. So I think that is absolutely amazing. And just knowing that you're in this space of like maternal health and maternal health outcomes, how did you get started? Because I know it kind of amplified after your daughter's passing, but you've been doing this work for quite some time. So how did you get started on this overall journey?
It's just surreal, once again, just how that played out. I entered into a intentional conversation about reproductive health when I was doing transformation work on myself. I'm constantly working on my evolution, my expansion, my healing. I use this terminology, and I didn't get it. I didn't make this up. One of my teachers did, but I'm always in a river conversation about my healing. Like, and you never step in the same river twice. So it's always moving and transforming, and I'm grateful. But I got to a point where I started to really look at the pivotal moments in my life that stopped and blocked me from being my fully expressed self, stopped me from being in generative relationships or showing up as my best self in relationships, whether it's intimate partnerships or relationships with my children. And I recognized that those stop moments were connected to me giving birth or being pregnant and then giving birth. What runs in my family on my mother's side is we give birth and then we experience postpartum depression. And with my second daughter, it was postpartum psychoses. And just that darkness, that disconnect, stayed with me. It lived in my physical body, definitely in my womb, but also in my heart, and the shame of being that way during the times when I was struggling and not wanting to tell anybody what was going on, feeling like they would make me think that I was crazy and
Yes.
that it would be unacceptable. And then the conditioning from family, like you just don't talk about that, right? That period was, for me, was just like, this, I'm not the only one, and I need to be talking about this. And because I'm also a performance artist and a writer, I'm just like, I need to use these mediums to create the space to heal and transform. And then the next layer was, I didn't go through this by myself. The second daughter, Jasmine, who was in my womb, I was so depressed when I was carrying her, and that energy transfers. And, she came out, and I was just like, in my mind, because I was sick and hormonally imbalanced, I was like, this is not really my baby. It was a traumatic birth. It was a term labor birth. So I was 7 months pregnant. She had a birth defect. She had surgery. She was in the hospital for a month. Nobody asked me if I was all right. Nobody
Goodness.
date was, my husband, we were both young, so he didn't know to ask. So I was in this state of darkness, and I could have hurt myself and hurt her. Literally, I could be dead, and so could she. I just straight talk. So I was
Yes.
speak to my daughter, who was in this toxic and hostile environment in my womb, and ask her if she wanted to do the work with me, because my entire family, my children are artists. So she writes, she acts, she's a videographer, photographer. So I asked her, do you want to co-create this piece with me, a dramatic piece? And after interviewing many women about their postpartum, we co-wrote a piece called Motherhood Echoes from the Womb. And then we performed it at a Black church. And then after that, when we did a panel discussion, the audience was like, what about infertility? What about carriage first? And 70 some odd year old women were like standing up and saying, I went through this or that, and I've never told the story until tonight. Like, story after story. So Jasmine and I, which is my daughter's name, we went back to the drawing board and interviewed more women about their reproductive traumas and losses, and all the stories started pouring out. So we wrote more pieces to add to the original piece, which we call a choreo poem. And she wrote original music, and it was just amazing. And one of the pieces that transformed or elevated our relationship was a piece that we did about our own relationship, being in the womb of a woman that doesn't want you, depressed and wants to push you out, being so conscious and so spiritual as a baby, like an infant, that you're like, I need to be out of here, that she came early. It's just like, I need to escape from this. And because of what I believe, like, she had her stomach and intestines weren't connected, so she needed surgery. I'm like, my toxicity was so huge on a spiritual level that her digestive system was thrown out of whack. So, you can think about the physical, but I always think about the metaphysical, that my stuff was so powerful that her digestion, like, she couldn't take in what I was giving her fully. So we wrote the piece and we performed the extended piece again, and it just resonated with the community. And then I was like, we want to do a conference, and the Motherwit conference got birthed from that experience. So that was in 2011. So even though I was intermittently in conversations about women and babies, I worked in foster care, all of that stuff literally got thrust into the world of reproductive health and reproductive justice from that experience of just recognizing that I needed more healing, and I was going to invite her and other people like me into the conversation.
So, Miss Shawnee, we're talking about Shamony and her tragic passing. How has that loss fueled you even more in your advocacy work?
People were wondering if I was off my rocker at her wake and her homegoing service because of the way I was acting. I told everyone at both services that, first and foremost, Shamony as spirit, as my ancestor, because this is our common language in our family since she was a child. We are very spiritual. We talk about the ancestors. We talk about the dreams and the visitations and all of that stuff. So I had no doubt that she was going to be coming in my business, just like she was when she was alive. So at the service, I'm like, y'all will not let this one day that she passed take over. And I said it on, I think on the platform at the when I spoke at the March on Washington, that one day will not dominate all of the thousands of days lived. Those two babies she pushed out, the two businesses that she created, the artistry that she manifested in the time that she was living from her young and teens, or even before that, she was an artist, a dancer, all of that, just vibrant and alive. And so I could not live with myself if I was walking around telling people that I can't do my work and be my purpose because my daughter died. Because I've dealt with and supported people through deaths. I've advocated and spoken up about and engaged in activism over very traumatic situations inside of my own clan and community and then beyond. And so it's like, yes, this is my child and she came from my womb, but my work is still my work. And so while I have this audience, you're going to learn today. So I utilized her homegoing service and the wake service, but the homegoing service even more because they were like 1,500 or so or more people that were present. I'm going to make sure that you understand what this is and talk about racism and talk about what happened to her and the crisis around Black maternal health and all of that. And so that's what I did and hit the ground running and have been going ever since. What I want to make sure that everybody is clear who's listening, that I advocate and I mourn. I run events and I mourn. Sometimes it's happening simultaneously. So when I did the last event, we were doing the opening because it was her birthday, December 19th. And so we honor her on that day. And I'm speaking about her and I just was overcome. Yeah. Tears of libation. Watch it, hear it, feel me. And we're going to keep moving and doing what we got to do because it's all part of it. And anybody's like, oh my God, she's crying. I'm like, my daughter died, damn it. Of course I'm crying. I'm still doing my work.
Whoa.
So I'm telling you, she would haunt me if I was going around like, Shawnee died and I can't do she would come for me. So I'm like, no, keep moving forward and doing what I have to do. So that's how it fuels me. I'm going to keep on. And then she has created a platform or the expansion of the work because her story's out there. And now I get to speak to more audience. So I chalk it up to her living, not her death, that has created this dynamic.
Did you know that essential oils are instrumental in helping you live a physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy lifestyle in a safe, natural, and effective way? Well, let Dr. Zupenda Davis-Shine introduce you to the amazing world of essential oils and all of their positive benefits, especially when it comes to easing pain, relieving anxious feelings, and assisting with sleep issues. Reach out to Lady Z today by email or direct message on Instagram, and she'll help you reach your health goals and address any ailments that you have. That's Lady Z's Oils, LADYZSOILS @gmail.com or at Lady Z's Oils on Instagram. For more information or to place an order, visit my.doterra.com/Lady Z's Oils.
Yeah.
One of my favorite topics is spirituality. And when I read your bio and read that you were a light worker, I was like, oh, my goodness. And then you co-founded an organization called Spirit of a Woman. So I have to know, and I know you touched on it a little bit earlier on in our conversation, but how much of your experience as a light worker and a healer do you bring to that hands-on work of coaching women and helping them through whatever experiences they're going through or trauma or anything like that?
It's funny. Or every time, all the time. Even in this session, I have my tools that I use. So I check in. I was like, should I ask this? Should I say this? Because why not? I'm like, when I operated from just this dome piece, right? It's great. I love it. I love the mind that I have, but it's not enough. I had to bring it down.
I have my crystals all around too, so I understand.
Yeah, this is all for it. Like what I absorb,
Right.
I'm like, I wouldn't be able to work if I just let that stuff keep getting built up in me. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so weary. And it's because I've been doing the work all day and the energy is compounded in my body, especially in my solar plexus in my body. So I bring it to everything. And I don't always name it because, I have contracts with large institutions. Department of Health, different organizations that are serving the community. I can't go up in there and be like, my daughter, who's an ancestor, said, Dr.
Right.
that, you need to check it. But I'll have the group engaging in intuitive selection of things. Like, I think, Angela, you've seen me do it. So I'll have, rather than them pick, because, the mind will get in the way, I'll just say, pick a number from 1 to 5, and 1 might be implicit bias and 5 might be white supremacy or whatever, and then have them speak from that. And rather than them pick and choose, because our natural inclination is to self-protect. And so I'm like, I'm not going to talk about white supremacy, but I can rock with diversity. So no, you got that intuitively. So can we hear from you, please? So I bring it to everything. My life works because of it. I'm unapologetic about it. I may not name it and call it this spirit, but it's always present. It's ever present in my life, and it gives me my life. So to deny it would be to deny myself.
That is so on point, but definitely need to develop those skills because there's not enough people readily available who have those skills.
It's awesome to hear that you actually bring it every day. And like you said, unapologetically you, and I absolutely love that. Dr. Clack, I think you were saying earlier, like, in your own work, you're seeing that shift. Are you starting to see that shift in most psychologists and psychiatrists on a whole? Or is it still kind of like, keep that hoodoo over there and scientifically speaking and from a clinical standpoint?
I think it's very much still Western mainstream, kind of the way that they do it. The other thing is when we talk about, I know and I can feel authentically the work Shawnee does. There are more and more people who are calling themselves all kinds of things that are moving into this space and are being very irresponsible with the gift or with the craft or whatever they want to call it. They're being very irresponsible because they realize that people are hurting and there is a need. So they make room for themselves in this place, and they are harming people. And I call them the wounded healers because they're wounded themselves and they are projecting their stuff out onto the people that they are saying. So I'm kind of worried about certain spaces where people walk in and say, I'm this, I'm that, and but they don't have the receipts. And I get concerned about who I'm seeing and the way that people are after they meet with people, what they look like. I'm a little bit concerned about where the field is going in that way about, I'm very protective over people's mind, bodies, and spirits. And I am concerned about some of the things I see in here. I'm a little bit worried about that.
Powerful what you're sharing, because a lot of the stuff around racial justice and racial equity, or EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, whatever the language that's being used, is very performative and perfunctory. It's like check the box. And because of what's happening with Black and brown women in maternal health, what happened with George Floyd, and now the other day with that I don't even want to name that. I'm not even going to give
that madness.
In order to be relevant, in order to not be checked or attacked, organizations are just stamping on, we honor race. And I'm like, nah, y'all. It's about what you do in real time and space.
Everybody got on the train real quick.
Yeah.
No,
and I don't know if some people got on just so that they weren't blackballed. Because I remember looking at my TV and like Prime was
dollar bill.
They had like a little banner saying Black Lives Matter. But then as soon as Pride came, it was like down.
And it's dangerous. Putting that out there, and it's just it's out of integrity. I just can't say enough about it. And because we're talking about reproductive health, I'm speaking in different arenas. Once again, unapologetically. I'm like, listen, y'all could take a class on implicit bias, or a class on whatever the terminology that's used for the courses or courageous conversations about race. That is not necessarily going to transform anything. Like, seriously, like how you show up. Are you a true, this is for white folks that are practitioners, are you truly anti-racist? Are you, when you at I say this all the time, at the Thanksgiving table with Uncle Bubba and they using the N-word and saying all this stuff, checking that person, or is it only at the job that you're using this terminology and language? Because this is a way of life. Really want to save lives. Like, you have to be about the business of yourself. When this Black or brown woman comes in, this immigrant woman comes in, and they're saying, I'm in pain, or this doesn't feel comfortable, I've lost weight, whatever the terminology is, or they've given birth and they come back and they're like, this doesn't feel right, or I think something's happening with my incision from the C-section, and you're dismissive. I'm like, it's not enough for you to take a class. Like, you really have to apply this to your life and your beingness. This is a way of, so it's very dangerous waters. And so wherever I have a platform, I'm like, you may not invite me back, but you will definitely hear what I truthfully have to say.
Right.
I don't know where we're going with all of this stuff, but I know what I'm charged to do and what I charge other people who are along the ride. So I'm grateful to all of you for being willing to have this conversation. And I pray that there'll be more like it. And I don't even know what all of you do. I know what Angela does, but just taking it to the work and being present and participatory in this anti-racist warfare, because that's what it is.
Shawnee, in addition to everything that you do, you also recently co-founded the Ariya Foundation, of which we were so happy and blessed to be able to have supported it in December. So can you share with our listeners what the goals of the Ariya Foundation are?
Yes. So Omari and I are both, all of us are artists. So Shamony manifested another artist for the family just to expand the tribe of artists. They co-created a business called Art. And Omari, I don't know if he mentioned it in this space, but just Shamony and who she was and is pushed him to manifest more in the realm of art. Like, because
he told us.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
I haven't been formally trained. And she's like, so look what you can do. Look what you literally have manifested. So when she passed, it just made sense for us to offer opportunities to educate, edutain, transform people through art and healing. So we're both artists. I think Omari's discovering who he is as a healer, and I'm putting that out there. He doesn't say that himself. So advancing reproductive innovation through artistry and healing is just a natural progression of the work that I'm already in and I do, but we're like really codifying that. And then being able to be a stand for families that experience these types of losses, the tangible things like Omari didn't have to buy a diaper for a whole year because the community rallied.
Yes.
We didn't have to pay for anything in reference to Shamani's service. And I don't know if it was mentioned, but I was just like, I'm paying for my baby service. And I was just in this space of like, this is the right thing to do. And I don't care. And I had to be sat down by my village. They were like, like I said, I don't know. I was about to say some choice words that they said. They were like, you will not, the village got you, and just generated funds. By the time you put the GoFundMe up, let's say it was 10 o'clock on a Sunday, by 10 a.m. on Monday, there was $14,000 in the fund for Shamony and the children. They're like, no, this loss is devastating. The resources that she brought into the family as the two businesses, because she was a natural hair care specialist, like that's gone. So we got to make sure they're good. And she didn't have insurance, which is like, I'm telling you, any young people listening, get you some insurance because you think you're going to live later.
Right.
And get it while you're young, because it's cheaper when you're young. So, yeah.
Insurance and life insurance.
Exactly. Yes. So, Omari and I, very early on, it's like we have to do something. And that event that we first did, the Aftershock event, we were like, we want to continue. And we're going to create something in her name to support in a tangible way. And then also create spaces for us to make sure that the larger community understands and covers. So that's what the purpose is. And we're still unpacking as we go, but that's where we landed.
Dr. Clack, can you explain to our listeners, both of you can explain to our listeners about the phenomena of sublimation and why so many survivors of loss and other tragic circumstances, such as Shawnee and Amari, thrust themselves into the very causes that they are afflicted by? Is this therapeutic for them? And also, side note, when you mentioned, Shawnee, that Amari is a healer, I really felt that, and I understand what you're saying, because sometimes that is how we receive a gift from something we may have suffered. So could y'all speak to that a little bit?
I think Shawnee just did when she was talking about the foundation. And earlier, when you also talked about when you had to speak before for your daughter, you said, I better show up.
Oh, the wait.
And you're like, I had to embody her in that moment because I think it's cathartic. I think it's therapeutic. It's a release. I think it's an exhilaration. I think all kinds of emotions, channeling very positive and helpful ways around what could have been, what is more sad and negative affect could come from an event. Sublimation, I think sometimes it's unconscious. People just kind of do it as part of healing. And then I think sometimes it's intentional, like setting up in a foundation, like, no, this is the work. We want to continue this work and it's going to be in her name. It's going to honor her because this is the spirit that she embodied and we're going to carry this on. I think that's one way that people can throw themselves into the part of healing. So you got grief work and then you have this kind of sublimation. And so that, and I think you just beautifully just talked about that when you described the whole foundation, and also with Omari. I think you just said it clearly.
He speaks of it often, and Omari amazes me. I'm like, you're a content expert, and it's only been like this year's
It
time.
is.
How he just adapted, and it was just so organic. Like, he wanted to know more, and he wanted to honor the women that have been lost, not just Shamony and the families that have been impacted, and the brothers that he represents, because the brothers roll now. They have their own tribe that have,
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
feel like it's an unusual tribe. It's sad circumstances, but what they create is so synergistic and powerful, that there are no words. And just straight talk, there's a lot of women in the conversation. And when the brothers show up, it's a different energy, and it attracts more people to the conversation. So when we did the very first Aftershock, we had a very direct conversation about Omari and other brothers being at the forefront, because we were like, if we want to really have an impact, we need to create a dynamic that's different than what's already out there on this platform. And, people might be like, well, y'all are being strategic about something like that, like your daughter's death or this type of issue. I'm like, absolutely, because we have to be strategic to stop this shit from happening again.
Oh, yes.
Strategic, intentional.
That's the
Yes.
intention. Yeah.
So just watching how people flock to the conversation, when not just brothers, but brothers of color to express their grief and to talk about what this is. And Omari also talked about, I think in your podcast, the last one, that when he was on, that he realized what Shamony experienced after having a Nari, just based on him now having to take responsibility.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Because brothers, I mean, whoever the caregivers are, folks don't understand what goes into caring for these children. You have two small ones. It's like, whoa, it's just so when after she had a Nari, he was just like, he didn't get it. Just straight talk. He says that, but he was able to get that after. But I wanted to say something about sublimation. With me, it's a mixed bag. I would never say that it's not. That's psychological process of like shifting something that has been negative and low vibrational into something positive. But for me, just as I said, it's spiritual work. So I'm like, low vibrational and high vibrational things for me are equal. I grow from it all. Death is a rite of passage. Me losing my daughter was a rite of passage in the way, not that I've never experienced death before, but losing my child was a rite of passage I had never experienced before.
Oh, yeah.
It projected me into deep grief, but it also gave me deep insight about time, about what I'm called to do, like multi-layers. So yes, there's a part that's sublimation, and the other part is just me being my purpose and doing what I'm ordained to do. And part of it is to experience some of these dark things. I'm like, why? And I was angry about that. I'm like, wait a daggone minute. I do this. I'm in this conversation and you take my child. But it's just so important to name that. I'm like, I gotta say that I was just like, what? Why me? Like, yo. But I'm like, why not? I had to reconcile that this had to be used for something bigger than myself.
Bigger than you.
I want to know, how does the warrior pick up the pieces?
I like that.
Well, one of the ways that I do is that recognizing that I don't have to pick up a weapon to win, just straight talk. As a warrior, I don't have to pick up a weapon to win. And my tongue is one of the weapons. Like, I can like go. So that is important, and that no battle or war is won as a single individual, so I'm just grateful that I have the tribe that I have, and it just keeps expanding. Now all of you are part of it, and that even warriors, if they're not operating from humility, when you go in, you're just gonna be knocked off balance. So I have to come to every space with humility at the forefront, and love for my people, love for what I'm doing, love for myself. I just know that being revolutionary doesn't mean that I have to be rageful. I'm just so clear about that.
So Dr. Clack, would you like to share any closing words on pregnancy, maternal loss, words of encouragement for our listeners?
I'm going to say one thing, and then I really want to pass these final words off to Shawnee, because I think who better than to give that word of encouragement, inspiration for the listeners, for people who are listening, because someone who is living and has lived this experience of loss, and also a lot of what she shared about who she was and how she became the person is going to be part and parcel for some woman or some women listening. And so I want you to speak from your heart about that. The only thing I want to say is that just what I would say when it comes to mental health is that I really encourage people have to learn to feel what they feel and give themselves permission to feel it deeply, and to openly grieve as necessary. Never feel ashamed or embarrassed or guilty, because people don't think that your loss was significant or important, and they don't want to give name to it, or they don't know how to even support you. I want people to know, feel it all. Fill it off, find a safe person, a safe community, and get what you need. Say what you need and get what you need when it comes to grieving. And I'm going to pass it on to Shawnee to take us home.
Yeah, what you just shared reminded me of something that is a mantra, and Spirit gave it to me, and I'll rock with this all the time. That I expose myself to expand myself, and that's how I heal, and that's how women that look like me and women that don't look like me will continue to heal and grow. Like that stigma you spoke about, like the more I expose and open up my chest so that you can see my heart, the more that I expand and grow and heal and transform, and I can live another day to manifest my purpose. And I want to say what I said on the stage when I spoke at the March on Washington, that Black lives matter, as we've been told, and Black wombs matter, and Black wombs create Black lives. So we need to be about the business of making sure that Black women are taken care of, and their babies are taken care of, and their families and our communities. Like, we really need to pay attention to that. So to all the women, Black and brown, that are listening, or BIPOC women who are listening, I love you, and keep speaking up and speaking out, because you deserve quality of care and you deserve quality of life. And just thank you for listening.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Miss Shawnee, thank you so
yes,
much. So
this
much
was-
gratitude.
This was great. Please follow A Tribe Called Fertility on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Feel free to DM us with your questions, thoughts, or share your fertility story. For more information on your amazing podcast hosts, please visit www.atribecalledfertility.com. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us. It really helps the show, and we welcome the feedback. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so that you know when we're dropping new content.